All right, go ahead, Stephen. We always start our presentation with a geography lesson because we tend to forget, right? So this is the continent of Africa. Our church does missions work down here in Mozambique as well as up here in Senegal. Today's report is all going to be about a trip that we just took to Mozambique down here. Go ahead. We forget how big Africa is. So you can see the outline of Africa. All of the United States, all of Spain, all of France, Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, Eastern Europe, China, and India and Japan all fit inside of the continent of Africa. All of our maps and all of our globes were Eurocentric. Our maps and our globes were made to try to show that America and Europe was more important. But geographic landmass size, Africa is way bigger. Almost all of the rest of the world fits inside of Africa. And so we work in Mozambique, which is down here, and Senegal, which is up here. To fly from one to the other is about 9 hours of flying. Think about it, if you flew from New York to Los Angeles, that's only 3 hours, or 3.5 hours.
From where to where?
From like New York to Los Angeles is only like 3.5 hours, but flying across the continent of Africa is 9 to 10 hours. It's huge. All right, go to the next one, Stephen. This is a close-up of the nation of Mozambique, so this is where we do our missions work. But to give you an idea of how big Mozambique is, from the top of Cabo Delgado down here to Maputo, the capital, that distance is Maine to Miami. So Mozambique is as long as the east coast of the United States. Now, most of our work that we do is in the central part of the country, right here. We fly into this city here, Beira, and then today I'm going to be talking about a conference we held, which was kind of out in this area here near Chimoio. So most of the missions work that we're doing is in this general vicinity, although we do have churches up here in Tet, and we've got churches over here in Nampula. So I've been to Nampula and I've been to Tet several times before too. All right. Go ahead, Stephen. Before I start talking about this, I want to tell a couple of stories about just getting there, because getting to Mozambique is a challenge, right? So this year, we flew from Chicago to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and then we were supposed to have like an hour and a 40-minute layover, because the flight from Chicago to Ethiopia is 14 hours. So we were looking forward to that hour and 40-minute layover so we could stretch our legs a little bit and stand up for a few minutes, right? Well, we get to Ethiopia almost 2 hours late. So our next flight was already finished boarding by the time we got off our first plane. So we had to sprint, and I mean sprint, running as fast as we could. And I thought, sure, we're missing this next flight, and there's not another flight that day. We'd have to wait a day to catch another flight. We sprinted as fast as we could. We got to the gate. The plane was floating. We ran on the plane, completely out of breath, collapsed into our seats, and they closed the door on the plane. We made it with 0 seconds to spare. But that meant we had no time to stand up and stretch.
Right. So we were crying and our butts were numb. And they really were. But I looked at Tim and I'm like, is our luggage going to make it? And he's like, I don't know. And he looks out the window and goes, oh, they're right there.
I literally watched them bring our bags up the plane, out the plane. I'm like, our luggage is here. And I'm just watching them put it on the plane. So
as soon as our luggage got on the plane, everything closed.
we took off. As soon as they got our luggage on, we took off.
Thank you, Jesus.
Yeah, God really helped us out on that
Yeah.
one. But seriously, we had to run as fast as we've ever run in our life to make that next flight.
Yep.
All right, so we arrived in Mozambique. Oh, the next story is, as many of you know, especially if you're from our church, we've had a lot of problems getting visas to enter Mozambique the last few years. A couple of years ago, they detained us for quite a few hours. This year, we waited in the immigration office about 30 minutes, and then once he called us in, and once he gave us his undivided attention, because he was doing 12 things at once he gave us his undivided attention, we had a visa in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Just like in and out,
Well,
done.
He's like, well, you don't need a visa.
Yeah, we technically didn't need a visa. He finally understood that. We paid the fee that we owe. And
I loved it. And he goes, and we'll see you next year. We're like, oh, okay.
The guy was super nice. He goes, I'll see you next year. I'm like, great.
All right.
There's going to be an election in Mozambique, so next year it'll be all different.
It could change. It'll change.
Because it was a very smooth process this year.
Very smooth.
Because the current president wants it to look that way.
Sure.
But there's an election happening this year, so next year it'll be all different.
Yeah.
All right, so we arrived on Saturday. The next day, Sunday, we went to visit one church This is what that church looks like from the front of the building. Go ahead. This is what the church looks like from the side of the building. This is a pretty typical Mozambican church. If you're out in the bush, there are grass huts, but this is kind of a typical city church. It's in the city of Chimoio. There I am preaching. Go ahead. Amy caught me in a funny pose while I was preaching. I was imitating people just sitting and not serving. So at one point in time, you can see there's a lady here standing up in front with me. At one point in time, I called for anyone who is sick. If you're sick, come on up front, we're going to pray for you. So a bunch of sick people came up, and then I said, all right, now we need people to come up and pray for them. So I brought other people up to pray for the sick people, and they didn't want to come. I literally grabbed people by the arm, and I just forced them up front. You're doing this. And so we brought up a bunch of people to pray for the sick. And then after we were done with that, I said, all right, who here was healed? Every single sick person that came up was healed.
Yeah.
So then I brought them up one by one to give their testimony. So this lady is giving her testimony of how she was healed.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, the next one is a video, and this is what worship music looked like in this church. So that's worship in that particular church, a lot of fun. All right, when you go and you visit a church, they are very much an honor-based culture, honor-based society, and so they want to honor us, and so they give us what's called a capelana. It's a huge piece of fabric. This is a capelana here. It's just this giant piece of fabric, but to them, this is life. Everything happens around a capelana. It's what the ladies wear. Amy's wearing a capelana skirt. This is what they'll tie their babies on their back with this. They'll put their groceries in it and put it on their head. So everything in life happens around a capelana.
And this is one of our new ones we got.
And so when we're there, they always want to present us with the capelana. That's what's happening here in this video. This is Olivia, a young lady that went with us on the trip. She's wearing now the capelana that they've just given us. We have that capelana at home. Now the next one's a video. After they give you the capelana, then there's a dance that has to happen that goes with it. So the next is the video of the dance that comes after the capelana.
Okay.
Just the dance that goes along with it. That's just the dance that goes along with getting the capelana. For those in our church, you may remember Amy had made a huge banner. We were celebrating that the vineyard had been recognized by the government of Mozambique. In Mozambique, churches have to be registered with the government, and it's a very long, very lengthy process. It took us 2 years to get through the process. And so we were going there to celebrate that we had finally been recognized by the government. And so Amy made this huge banner. We had it in the back of our church back here for several weeks. And many of you that are regular members signed the back of the banner. So we presented the banner to them, and here are some of the young men in the church hanging the banner up.
They put it up right away. And our national leader was so touched. He just loved that. Yeah, it was great.
All right, this next video, it's right as we were there to host a conference. It's the first night of our conference. We're just kind of gathering, and we're eating outside. The video is kind of a self-explanatory. I'm talking to the video, and it'll explain itself. We're on the first night of the conference, and we're eating dinner outside at night after dark in lights. And these lights are only possible because of the Crystal Lake Vineyard. Just like being your brought electricity here. Go to the next. So you may remember, if you're part of our church, several years ago we did a fundraiser to buy this transformer because this property that the church is on did not have electricity. And electricity was about a half a mile away. So we had to buy and pay for the power poles and the wires and this transformer to bring electricity to this property. But then right across the street there was an informal settlement, and we didn't want to be the rich snobby church that had electricity right across the street from a slum. And so we bought a bigger transformer so that we could share power with the informal settlement across the street. So everybody across the street has access to electricity if they want it. So before the conference started, we had dinner with our leadership team. That's me, that's Pastor Sam from South Africa. That's Zavimbi, our main leader in Mozambique. Tim Fetter, who is from South Africa, he did a great job helping us. Amy, Olivia, the young lady that came with us, Ronnie Lee, and this is Dora. It was really funny. Dora is usually on our protocol team. She normally assists us and helps us. And so we're sitting here eating, and I see Dora walk in. I'm, hey, Dora, come sit down, join us. And so she sat down and she's joined us, and after all, she's like, I actually wasn't here to help you guys. I'm getting married. I was here to reserve this room for my wedding ceremony. And we're like, oh, sorry, so go ahead, go do your thing. Go do what you need to do. Go ahead. This is the first night. The first night, the conference really didn't start. People were still sort of gathering and coming in, but we had a party in the worship celebration. So there's Amy and Olivia. Next one's a video of what worship looked like that night. That's one of their favorite songs. And it says, You Are Yahweh. It's just a very simple song, but they love that song. Go ahead, Stephen. So then the next morning, the conference officially started, and this conference was to be about worship. We've noticed over the years of going there that what they do as worship more closely resembles tribalism than biblical theological worship. And so we were going to try to walk a very fine line of teaching them, what does biblical worship look like? What is worship without becoming westernizing, colonizing? We're not there to colonize. We're not there to say, hey, do it our way. But we wanted them to understand biblical worship. And so our whole conference was on worship. This is, all of you in our church know that we support Equip Mozambique. This is Carla from Equip Mozambique, who is an amazing worship leader. So before we went, I called her, twisted her arm a little bit, and asked her to come help us lead this. She said yes and did just a phenomenal job. And then Amy joined her. You can see the one picture with Amy's hands up in the air. They were getting into it. So Carla and Amy led the very first session. Next one is a video of Amy and Carla leading worship. They're doing the song, Open the Eyes of My Heart, in Portuguese. Because she was trying to pronounce the Portuguese right.
So when you go on these trips, you think you prepare for one thing. You're like, I think God's going this way. And then oftentimes he's like, nope, we're going to do this. So that morning is when I learned, oh, you're going to be helping Carla lead worship in Portuguese. Okay. So luckily you can see she typed out the words, and I know Portuguese enough, though sometimes it sounded more like Spanish than Portuguese. But our leader came up to me afterwards. I didn't know you could sing in Portuguese. And I said, I didn't either. But God does amazing things, and she was great. You just have to be open for whatever God's doing at that moment.
So then our next session, we did a podcast kind of session. We had our panel of experts. This is Tim Fetter from South Africa, who is a phenomenal worship leader and musician, Amy and Carla, and then me as the moderator. That's Joseph, our translator. So I asked a couple questions, and then they answered, and then we would allow the attendees of the conference to ask questions about worship, and our panel would answer the questions. And they had great questions. It was really good. This is a funny picture because somebody caught Amy in the middle of answering a question. Go ahead. All right, so over the course of this conference, 300 people attended. And we have to feed them breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's the way it works in Africa. If you have a conference, you're feeding them, okay? This is the kitchen.
Yeah.
These ladies fed 300 people in this kitchen.
And the food was delicious.
The food was amazing.
Delicious.
So here, these ladies, they're just out there every day, all day cooking like this. This is the kitchen. This is how much firewood we went through for that week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even after dark, because in the evening we would eat after dark, because it was wintertime when we were there, so it would get dark early. So they're out there cooking in the dark. Here they're making shima, which it's hard to explain, but think really, really thick grits. Like white cornmeal grits, but like thick enough that you can just eat it with your hand.
Yeah, that's what they use. Yeah.
What's it made out of?
Cornmeal.
Yeah.
This is how they do dishes. This might have been why I got so sick. Because after they wash the dishes, they just toss them on this thing to air dry, but they don't air dry very well. And so when they give you your dishes, they're still wet. That might have been why I got so sick. Here we are eating under a mango tree. This is a giant mango tree right here. So we're out there eating under the mango tree. I always eat outside. What did you eat, you ask? I'm glad you asked. This was a typical meal: fried fish, rice, coleslaw, and potato wedges. The guy that was in charge of cooking this year loved fish, so we had fish almost every day.
So good. So good, though. Very good.
This is the other people attending the conference, just spread out over all the property, eating lunch. The ladies always gathered by the building because the building would absorb heat from the sun. Again, we were there in the wintertime, so it was kind of chilly, especially for them. And so the building would feel warm, and so the ladies would gather up by the building to stay warm. This is Olivia, the young lady that came with us, and they're playing Uno. She had brought Uno cards with them, and she was teaching them Uno. I had mentioned earlier to our church, we had brought a bunch of our beach balls because you can bring the beach balls flat. And so we gave them to some of the children to play with during the conference. So here's a little girl with one of our beach balls. All right, this is a video of some of the children just playing with the beach balls from our church. All right, if you're part of our church, especially if you come on Wednesday nights, you know one of our pastors started a Christian preschool in a UNHCR refugee camp up in Nampula. So in Nampula, there is a huge United Nations refugee camp. I've been there once before. It's an amazing place. One of our pastors started a Christian preschool there. This is that team. This is the pastor who started it. This is the teacher, Sophia. This was her husband. They were able to come to the conference we were hosting, so we got to meet the team that's running that Christian preschool. Afterward, the teacher, Sophia, came to me and said, hey, can I have all the beach balls and take them back to the refugee camp? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. She goes, they'll be the first toys they have.
Yeah.
I don't have it in this presentation, but later, after she got home, she sent me a video of the children in the refugee camp playing with the beach balls.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, these are the first toys they have.
Yeah.
All right, this is, as the conference now continues, this is me preaching. This is my translator, Joseph. Our very first night there, as people were just kind of gathering in, I'm just walking around meeting people, and he comes up to me and he says, I'm not part of the vineyard, but I heard there was a conference going on, and I came, but I wanted to make myself known to you because I can translate. I said, dude, thank you. We worked him like a mule the rest of the week. He probably regretted saying that to me, but boy, we worked him hard. All right, so this is still me translating. This is Joseph translating to Portuguese, but then many of our people didn't speak Portuguese. They only spoke Sena. So this is Pastor Decembro, who came up to then translate Sena. So I would speak, and I would have to wait for Portuguese and then Sena. So there's quite a long delay as I'm preaching.
And December let us know that Sena is not a language he knows.
But
he knew it enough, he could translate. But he's like, yeah, it's not, he knows Chichewa. He goes, I kind of know Sena, but he knew Sena.
later, he got into a little trouble with his translation. I'll show you a video of that in a minute,
Yeah.
all right? Go ahead. So eventually, December didn't continue. So this young man, who had been the drummer in their worship team, came up to translate Sena. So in one of my messages, I was preaching about the woman who came and anointed Jesus' feet with the pure nard perfume, and it said it was in an alabaster jar. And I was explaining worship. I was explaining costly worship. Worship is to be costly. And not only was that nard perfume very expensive, but the alabaster jar was worth a year's wages. It was a very expensive jar. And the jar had no lid. You couldn't open it or close it. The only way to open the alabaster jar is to break it. And so I grabbed a glass Fanta bottle and I broke it open. I broke it open. Well, my protocol team didn't appreciate that, and so they came running right up, and they're cleaning up all the glass, and I'm like, guys, don't worry about it. So they're cleaning up the glass and me breaking a bottle. So I was preaching about a word that means to bow down. Worship has a posture. And when we read the New Testament, almost every time you see the word worship in the New Testament, the Greek word is to bow down. And so I was demonstrating to bow down, but both of my translators bowed down with me.
Yeah. Yep. They were very good.
I raised my hand, both of my translators raised their hands. This is Pastor Zavimbi. He's the main pastor there in Mozambique. He was preaching, and this is another one of our pastors, Augustino. He was kind of acting out what Zavimbi was preaching. All right, so a minute ago I mentioned that Pastor Decembro was translating into Sena. Well, Pastor Decembro is a very charismatic, gargacious person. And when he was translating into Sena, sometimes he would get a little carried away, and he became a distraction. We eventually had to ask him to stop. But this little video clip kind of gives you an example of how he got a little carried away with his translation.
Depois de destruir, depois de terminar,
He would cause the audience to laugh so much. We eventually asked him, okay, you stop. And we brought up the young man to do Sena because I love December, but he was just getting into it so much that everybody was laughing. All right, so the restrooms at this church property are like outhouses, but there's no running water. They do have flush toilets, but there's no water. So they use this big plastic tank up on this stand to hold water above the level of the toilets so you can flush the toilets. Well, you have to fill the tank by hand with buckets. So all the young men would gather and form a bucket brigade to fill that tank. The problem is sometimes you go into the restroom and you wouldn't know that the tank was empty. And you'd go to flush and there was no water. So then you had to go find the young man and say, hey, quick, go fill that tank for me, will you?
Yeah.
All right, so one morning we showed up at the conference. We noticed everything was a buzz. Everyone was just buzzing, and something wasn't right. And I went to Zim, what's going on? He's like, well, we had planned that the district administrator was going to come to that morning's conference. District administrator, the best way I can relate that to us, it would be like if our county board president said, hey, I'm coming to church. All right? So a county board president level of politician had said they were going to come, a woman, she was going to come to church. But that morning, the Secretary of State called and said, hey, I'm coming too.
Well, explaining Secretary of State.
Yeah, so of the province. So it would be like in the state of Illinois, there's a governor, and then we would have a Secretary of State who would be the guy that actually ran the state. So the governor is elected, but they're just a political figurehead. The Secretary of State runs the province. He runs the state. He's the person with the authority and the person that gets things done. They often believe that the Secretary of State actually has a lot more influence and power than the governor. Well, that morning, the Secretary of State called and said, I'm coming. And we're like, whoa. So all of our leadership team said, we need a higher level of protocol to receive this person. This is a big deal. So they rearranged the chairs, and they put out fancier chairs and all kind of stuff. And then we formed a reception line. And so I'm waiting in line to receive the Secretary of State. This is the Secretary of State here. That's Zabimi, our main pastor there. This was the Secretary of State's translator, who's a Catholic priest. You can see he's got his collar on, his cross on, but he was translating. So this is the Secretary. This is the district administrator. This is who we thought was coming. But this man shows up, and when he came and he shook my hand, he said, he asked me where I was from. I said Chicago. He's like, leave many good things in Mozambique, but take many good things with you home.
Yeah.
That was his word to me.
Yeah.
He was a great man.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
He really was.
Okay, so once we got inside the church and we were ready to start, the district administrator, this woman, it was her job to introduce the Secretary of State. This is how they do that in Africa. So that's the district administrator introducing the Secretary of State. Here's the Secretary of State speaking to us. This is Joseph, our translator, still translating. At the end, Zavimi, this is our main pastor here, he presented the Secretary of State with a Bible. That's what he's holding up here is a Bible. Go to the next picture. You can see a little bit closer up picture of the Bible. And he said, I will read this Bible with my family. And in a minute, you're going to get to see him preach a little bit. Okay, this next one is a video. One of the young people attending the conference made a compilation video on his iPhone. So this is a video that he put together, lots of little clips, pictures, video that he's put together on his iPhone. And you'll get to see the Secretary of State, he like full on preached. And you'll get to hear a little bit of it with his translation. So this video was made by one of our young people at the conference.
Nós temos falado constantemente que a igreja faz parte da nossa governação, participa na governação deste país, desta província.
And once again, I said that church is part of our government.
Sem a igreja,
Without a church,
sem o Deus,
without God,
provavelmente não íamos conduzir bem os nossos programas, os discípulos.
probably we couldn't take the good destiny of our people.
Mais uma vez, a igreja em Moçambique faz parte da governação.
what he said there is, with church is part of our government, and without God and without church, we could do no good things for our people.
Yeah.
All right, so now the reason we were there was to celebrate the fact that the vineyard had been recognized by the government. So this is a different government official. I forget his name and title. But he's holding up the documents that show that the vineyard is now registered with the government. Again, it took us 2 years to get those documents. But this brother talked for what, 3 hours?
No, he didn't talk for 3 hours. It felt like it.
It felt like 3 hours. He talked a long
He
time.
talked a long time, but not 3 hours.
He talked a long time. And he was there to present us the paperwork for being recognized. Go ahead.
Video 1661.
All right, the next video is just a short little worship clip, kind of as we celebrated this event here. That was just kind of after that whole big thing of being recognized by the government. The next one is a video of Amy and one of the pastor's wives, Isabel, dancing.
Oh. Okay, so funny story about that though. On the other side were all the young women, and they were doing like the move. I couldn't do any of what they were doing, so that's why
Isabel came over to help you.
Isabel and I were just like, okay, we're just gonna do this because she just had a baby.
Well, she's got a baby on her back.
and
yeah.
I'm old. And I'm like, I can't do any of what they're doing, so.
This is the young lady, Olivia, that went with us on our trip. So this lady, Olivia, she attends the Vineyard Church in Lockport, Illinois, down by Joliet, and she read my book, and she got inspired to get involved with missions, and so her pastor told her to call me, and so I was mentoring her through Zoom for a while. She just had to come with us on this trip. This was her first ever missions trip, first time to Africa, first time to Mozambique, and we
Yep.
just threw her in the deep end.
And she did great. She did great. She did amazing.
So there's Olivia and Amy speaking to the church. They were just giving the church a greeting, basically. But so this is Amy with a bunch of the pastor's wives. In Africa, you always call a pastor's wife mama.
Yeah.
So these are the mamas, okay? So there's Amy. This is Zavimi's wife, Katrina. Clemelina's wife, Isabel. Augustina's wife, Presencia. And this is Grace. Her husband, Shidoku, was one of our vineyard pastors, but he passed away, so she's a widow now. So as a movement, we're having to support her because she has a very small farm, and it didn't rain this year, and so she lost her crop. So when we were there, we did the best we could to take care of her. All right, so our conference in Gondola has now ended, and we're going to travel back to the city of Beira to go to Equip Mozambique. So we're driving with John to get back to Beira. This here in the United States would be called entrapment, and it would be illegal. But there it happens. So we're driving along the road, and we see what looks like a construction site. There's orange cones, there's a dump truck, and there's a thing that looks like a construction site transit level. But hidden in the middle of that is a radar gun. And this guy in the construction vest is a police officer.
Yeah.
So they make it look like construction, but they're police officers, and then they pull you over. And they don't have police cars. They just stand out in the middle of the road, and they just point, pull over.
Yeah.
And so we got a speeding ticket. This is John. This is John from Equip Mozambique over here. Because the officer's office was the inside of the truck. So he's in here writing the ticket. The ticket cost us $16. So we were driving along. And the funny thing is I got to be honest. I've traveled with Zavimi, our main leader, a lot. Zavimi's always late, and his vehicle always breaks down. And I didn't want to be late getting into Beira for our work with Equip Mozambique. So I said, John, will you come out and pick us up? That way I know we'll be on time and I know we won't break down.
We left late.
We left late because we had to take 9 other people with us. So the van is completely full. And then we're driving along, we hear a really bad noise coming from the back of the van. So we thought, well, maybe the tire's low. So we get out our little pump here, and we're trying to pump up the tire, but we quickly realized that wasn't the problem. So we keep driving for a little bit. Go ahead. And we realized, so we find a roadside mechanic. This was Sunday night, probably about 8 o'clock by now, so it's Sunday night, 8 o'clock. But we find this guy here who's a roadside mechanic. He's like, hey, I'll take a look at it. So he jacks it up, takes the wheel off, and right away realizes that we have a bad bearing. Our wheel bearing has gone out. And that's an easy fix, but it's 8 o'clock Sunday night out in the middle of nowhere with a roadside mechanic, so he can't get a bearing for us at that time of night. So I'm like, well, just pack it with grease and tighten it up and we'll go. And so he did. He put it all back together, and we tried to keep going, but the noise was just horrendous. As we're driving, it's just like, and you're like, oh, this thing is going to blow up or catch on fire. I was afraid the bearing would get so hot the thing would catch on fire. But so thankfully, this man, he worked on it for 2 hours, and he charged us what would be in US $32. And so then after we keep going, we called Eugenio. All of the people in the Crystal Lake Vineyard know Eugenio. He's been here. We called Eugenio, and he was in the area. I'll come get you guys. I'll come pick you up. So he comes and he meets us, but he already had his family with us in the truck. So this is now the back seat of the truck. This is Eugenio's wife. What was her name? Aurelia. And that was their youngest son. Amy, Pastor Sam, and Casey from the Equip Mozambique board were already there. So this is now the back seat of the truck. Go ahead. And Olivia, who was with us, she was eager. I mean, she was excited to ride in the back of the truck. She thought that was going to be a lot of fun.
Okay. So what should have taken 3 to 4 hours took 7.
Yeah, it should have taken us 3 hours to make that trip. It took us 7 hours to make that trip that night. So we get into Equip Mozambique the next day. This is the headquarters of Equip Mozambique. There's me. I'm wearing the same shirt that I have on today. I'm just speaking to, this was going to be a special occasion for our 10th anniversary. The Equip Mozambique had turned 10 years old, so I was addressing the staff and all the visitors that were there. I'm the chairman of the board of the organization, and over there they think that's a big deal. So they always want me to do everything. It's kind of goofy, but... So, what's that?
No.
John and Carla wanted to give some of their top leaders an award. The award was basically given to people who exemplified the vision and purpose of Equip Mozambique, like people that really get it and really carry out the vision. So they wanted me to give out the award. So here I am giving out the awards. This is Pastor Lucas. He's a local pastor that serves with them there at Equip Mozambique. And then Amy would give out little gifts. I had like little gifts that would go with the award. So Amy's giving out the gifts. This is Nora, or my Nora is her name. She's the head of the sewing school. So the sewing school we have there, she's the leader of that. There's her getting her award. Amy giving the gift. This is Flavia. She is the head of the administrative office. So we have a pretty good sized administrative officer that runs the organization. She's the head of the administrative office, but she's also the PR person. Whenever we need a public statement or someone to make an appearance or be on tape or be on video, she does all of our PR and speaking for us. And this is Selena, who is the librarian. Because we have a very large library there in the Equip Mozambique building. It's one of the largest Christian lending libraries in the country. Possibly the largest. She's the librarian. Here's Eugenio that you guys remember. He's speaking to the staff and the people there now. This was the board that was present. Not all of our board could be, but obviously me and Amy. Casey from St. Louis. Pastor Sam, who's originally from Kenya, now lives in St. Louis. And this is Tanashi, who's originally from Zimbabwe, and he is heading up the work as we expand into Zimbabwe. And this is the board with some of the staff. Nora, Lucas, John and Carla, and then Eugenio on the end over here. Before we left, we knew we were going there to help them celebrate their 10th anniversary. Amy had an idea to give John and Carla a gift. So we talked to Dawn here in our church, Dawn Gilman, about making a plaque. That's what Dawn's business is she makes plaques. And so Dawn helped us come up with this plaque to celebrate their 10th anniversary. So we're giving John and Carla their plaque here. I wish Dawn was here today. There's a compilation of pictures of them receiving the plaque. We also gave them a big check. Now, it wasn't big in money, it was just big in size. When they saw how big it was, they were probably excited, but the amount didn't match the size of the check necessarily. Go ahead. So then afterward, everyone that got an award went outside for pictures. So this is some of the staff there, really the key leaders, the key staff. Go ahead. All right, James, make sure the camera doesn't see this part, please. While we were there, the highlight of the trip for me was this. So we've had a sewing school there for many years. You guys know all of our products over there on the table on the other side of this wall. Women can come and they can learn how to sew, and they eventually earn their own sewing machine, so when they leave, they can go and they can make a living for themselves. These are women that, typically in our sewing school, these are women that were prostitutes, homeless, lost their husband, something like that, and now they have a way to... Debt. Now they have a way to take care of themselves. Well, the local prison heard about our sewing school, and they invited us, hey, will you bring the sewing school into the prison? And of course we said yes. And so this is some of the sewing school in the prison. This is Casey. She's on our board. The rest of these are prisoners. And now they can't have a sewing machine in the prison, but they can have needle and thread and scissors. And so Carla and Nora have taught them how to sew. Go ahead, Stephen. So this is some of the students. We each got to speak to them a little bit, so I gave like a 1-minute message. Don't think your life is over just because you ended up in prison. God still has a plan for your life.
Yeah.
I had a prophetic word for this woman. It just messed her up. She cried for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And so what we're kind of sitting here, this is kind of how they set it up for us. Each prisoner then came and presented to us the things that they had been making. Now what I think is so cool is they do this normally when we're not there. And Carla and Nora, the sewing instructor, will inspect all of their things. And if they meet quality, we will buy them off them right there on the spot. Right there on the spot, we will buy that thing so they see that they are earning money and they're contributing to society even while in prison.
Yeah.
But now if they don't meet quality, Nora, the teacher, sits down with them right on the spot and says, okay, this is what you did wrong, this is how you need to do it. And she'll show the student right there on the spot how to fix it so that they're still learning and growing.
But in such a loving way, but they're also just teaching them quality. I would have been like, oh, whatever you make is fine. They're like, no, this is about quality, and when you get out, so you can earn a living.
What we do is at our main sewing school, as they're sewing, they take all of their scraps, all of their little pieces of scraps and long ribbons, and we put those in bags and we take them into the prison for the prisoners to use. What was interesting is as we came in the prison, by the way, we could not bring cameras or cell phones into the prison. We had to leave them at the gate. We had to surrender our passports at the gate as well. But the prison guards so love what we're doing, the guy who is head of rehabilitation for the prison took these pictures and sent them to us.
Yeah.
But he said we can't share them or put them on social media, so that's why I directed James to turn the camera away from this, all right? So these pictures were actually taken by the head of rehabilitation. But we take all of the scraps into the prison, and we watch lots of other people coming into the prison trying to bring food, because you don't get fed when you're in prison over there.
Well, they get a little bit. It's just
You're dependent on family members to bring you food. Well, they inspect the food. They open it and they rifle through it and they inspect it, right? We brought in big bags of fabric. They didn't even look like, okay, go ahead. Didn't even look at them.
Yeah.
But so these students in the prison are just working with small scraps of fabric. And so these are some of the things they make. They make little animals, like a little elephant here. And then we brought them key rings so they could turn it into a keychain. And then they love to make like these little flowers at the beginning because they're just working with little scraps of fabric. And then they get real creative and they'll take those little flowers and they'll make something like this.
They've also turned that into a skirt.
Yeah, they can make this into like a little girl
Little
skirt.
girl
This is
skirt.
like a table or like a placemat.
Yeah.
And then they make lots of these little headband things.
Or it's a necklace.
Necklace. But all these things I just showed you here came from these ladies in the prison.
Yeah.
Right? So there is a woman prisoner out there somewhere that made this.
And when we told them, I told them, I go, well, we're going to be buying some of this stuff and we're taking it back to the U.S. And they were, oh my gosh. So, yeah.
But again, our sewing school ministry, if their stuff meets quality, we will buy it from them on the spot so that they feel like, hey, I'm moving forward in my life, right? Okay, go ahead. Now, as our ladies graduate the sewing school and John and Carla monitored how they were doing, they began to realize that some of the students weren't flourishing as much as we had hoped. And so they put a little thought and study into what can we do to help our graduates do even better in life. And what they came up with is to put the sewing school graduates into a sewing small group. And now the students are flourishing because they have somebody to sew with, they have community, they have accountability. Some of these ladies are doing amazing things now that they're in this small group.
Yeah.
So they wanted to take us to visit a small group. So here we are visiting a sewing school small group. This is a typical Mozambican home, by the way. We're in somebody's home here. I was really sick by this point,
Oh, yeah, he was not.
and I knew this home didn't have a bathroom. I've never prayed so hard in my life that I wouldn't get sick while I was there, because this home didn't have a bathroom. And so then each student, the last picture of this part, each student would stand up and tell us her testimony of how she's been using what she learned in the sewing school.
Right, and so they have a leader of each of these cell groups, and they do them by area. So they have several of these in different areas depending on where the women are. And they start with they do a Bible study with it. They're praying for each other. They're praying with each other. It's more than, and then they talk about business and how can I make this better. But they've taken what they've learned in the sewing school, because the sewing school wasn't just about sewing. It was about making them followers of Jesus.
It was discipleship.
It's discipleship, and then they disciple each other, and then they were a little apologetic. Well, this woman here, she didn't graduate from the sewing school, but she knows how to sew, and we brought her in with us, and we're teaching her about Jesus. We're like, yes, that's what it's about. So
Even in
that
this
was
meeting,
really
when we
neat.
went there, they started with a Bible study.
Yeah,
One of the ladies, this lady right here, did a Bible study, even as we started when we were there with them. But then each lady stood up and talked about how she's been doing with her sewing since she graduated. While we were there, Equip Mozambique is in a new building. While we were there, they put a sign up in the front of the building. You can see the guy still doing it. It took a while to do this. Get this, in Mozambique, they tax you based on the number of letters in your sign. So we had to come up with a sign that conveyed what it needed to convey, but as fewest letters as possible.
well, of course, Mozambique is a really long
Mozambique's
word.
a big word, too, so they tax you on the letters in the sign.
They know what they're doing.
As I've mentioned in the past, behind the main building of Equip Mozambique, there's an outbuilding that we've been renovating to use for other purposes. The construction on the outbuilding is ongoing, but they were working on it while we were there. So while we were there for this big celebration of the 10th anniversary, this man came to visit us. Mozambique is known as being a very corrupt government, and so they have started an anti-corruption department. He is the leader of the anti-corruption department, and he came to celebrate with us the Juris. One of the things we're doing is called this Juris. We're making Mozambicans aware of their law and rights, because most people don't realize that they do have rights and there are laws. And so we're trying to make people aware of that so they can defend themselves. So this guy is the head of the anti-corruption department from the government. So he came to be there, which I thought was great. Now here's the irony. They made this anti-corruption department, and they put a guy in charge of it that's very passionate for it, but they gave him no money and no authority. So the poor guy has...
Baby steps.
The poor guy is just a puppet. He can't do anything. But anyway, he came to something which is great. So while we were there, they did a drama. So these are all actors. This woman, and this guy are actors, and they're acting out a drama. So how we make Juris known to the people, they go out on the street and they do these public dramas in parks and public places. And in this drama, this was the dad, this was the wife, and this was to be a 13-year-old girl, and the dad was trying to sell her off into marriage.
Yeah.
And in Mozambique, that's very common, and most girls just get forced into it. They don't know that there's a law on the books that says you can't get married till you're 18. So this drama raises awareness that even a dad cannot force his daughter to get married until she's 18.
Yep.
So they were just kind of demonstrating to us what their dramas look like.
Yep. That's really good.
What did you say? Oh, all right. So while we were there as part of the celebration, they also hired a local indigenous dance team to come. So this is some local indigenous dancers. come demonstrate that for us?
No, I don't.
All right, so again, while we were there, we were celebrating Equip Mozambique's 10th anniversary. We even had a big cake. John, Carla, and Eugenia there are cutting the cake. This is really cool. So while we were there, we also did some Sunday school graduations. This young lady had been one of the prisoners that was in the prison school, and then when she got out, she came to the main school to finish and to graduate so she could get her sewing machine. So here she is receiving her sewing machine, and it's a hand crank sewing machine so she can work even if there's no electricity. But this man is the head of rehabilitation at the prison system. He came to celebrate the graduations of his former prisoners.
And there's a, and there's a bag right next. They get a bag of stuff that helps them get started in their business.
So this one is graduating. She's getting her sewing machine. She's getting her bag of stuff. The prison guy is there to celebrate with her.
He truly wants rehabilitation. Yep.
There's a whole bunch of that. This is a picture of most of the recent Sunday school graduates. So all these women now have a chance at life.
Yeah.
Like a real life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not just a Sunday school, it's discipleship. They learn about Jesus, they learn about sewing, and we teach them business skills so they know how to make money and they're not out there just sewing to lose money.
Yeah.
So all those women had a great chance. So while we were there, we were celebrating the 10th anniversary, but we were also there to have our annual board meeting. So we had rented a room in the local hotel where we were all staying. So this is how the hotel set it up for us. Very formal board meeting, very formal setting. You can see I'm sitting up here. They make me sit at the head of the table. There's John lurching in the corner. That's Pastor Sam. Amy's kind of in it. There's Carla leading us in worship. So again, we're having a very official, very formal board meeting. We're trying to be just really formal. There we are praying together as a board. Carla leading worship in the front there. We did the whole put post-it notes on the whiteboard kind of thing as we're planning and strategizing. We're praying and we're listening and we're strategizing for the future of the organization. We took big sheets of white paper and we wrote all of it, and we ripped them in half and we taped them up on the wall to get them in the right place. And we're trying to figure out what they need and what we can provide and all this kind of stuff as a board. This is Tanashi. He is on our board, but he is from Zimbabwe. And so Equip Mozambique is now expanding into Zimbabwe, and he is leading the expansion into Zimbabwe since he is from Zimbabwe. We have fallen backward into a drug rehab center in Zimbabwe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tanashi is donating his own land and property and buildings, and Celebrate Recovery from the United States is going to set up the program for us. We just have to run it.
Yeah.
So we are going to have an in-house drug rehab center in Zimbabwe. Like any day.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so now I gotta set the stage. The next video to me is the best video of our whole trip. So we're having this really formal board meeting. We got this formal setting, and we're trying to be a real official board and do board things. But at one point, we just had to stop and be African. And this is the video of us in the middle of our formal board meeting stopping to be African. I love this. This is sandwiches in there.
Right, and the guy playing the guitar is the head of all the IT stuff they do.
Yeah, that was the IT guy playing guitar.
And the guy next to him is becoming a lawyer. Like these guys are top notch. But yet we take a break and we.
Isn't that a fun way to have a board meeting?
Yeah, it was awesome.
Go ahead, Stu.
Yeah.
So this is we're done now to quit Mozambique, and we're ready to head to the airport. This is our last meal before we went to the airport, and I was so sick at this point.
So sick.
I couldn't eat a thing. We just had to get to the airport. Even during that last video, I couldn't. This is our Mozambican granddaughter, Amelia. We get to see her once a year. She's holding on to Amy.
She just runs up to me.
This is our daughter, Amelia, and 5 days before we got there, Mia had another baby, so that's a 5-day-old baby there that they were thinking of naming Timothy. I don't know what they decided on that.
Because they don't name their babies right away, and I said, well, what about Timothy? Oh, so I don't know.
All right, this is it. We're done. This is one last video of worship in Mozambique.